Hi guys, this is Connie, back for some more Connie Reads White Fragility. We are on chapter 4, and this is probably going to get broken down into at least 2 sections, depending on how long it takes, maybe 3. Here we go. The title is, How Does Race Shape the Lives of White People? And under it, it has a quote. White people. I don't want you to understand me better. I want you to understand yourselves. Your survival has never depended on your knowledge of white culture. In fact, it's required your ignorance. And it's a name that I am totally potentially going to butcher, and I hope I don't. Ijeoma Oluo. I apologize. To understand how white people become so difficult in conversations about race, we need to understand the underlying foundation of white fragility, how being white shapes our perspectives, experiences, and responses. Every aspect of being white discussed in this chapter is shared by virtually all white people in the Western context, generally, and the U.S. context specifically. At the same time, no person of color in this context can make all these same claims. This next section is called Belonging. I was born into a culture in which I belonged racially. Indeed, the forces of racism were shaping me even before I took my first breath. If I were born in a hospital, regardless of the decade in which I was born, any hospital would be open to me because my parents were white. If my parents attended a childbirth preparation class, the instructor was most likely white. The videos they watched in class most likely depicted white people, and their fellow classmates with whom they built connections and community were also most likely white. When my parents read their birthing manuals and other written materials, the pictures most likely depicted primarily white mothers and fathers, doctors and nurses. If they took a parenting class, the theories and models of child development were based on white racial identity. The doctors and nurses attending my birth were in all likelihood white. Although my parents may have been anxious about the birth process, they did not have to worry about how they would be treated by the hospital staff because of their race. The years of research demonstrating racial discrimination in healthcare assure me that my parents were more likely to have been treated well by hospital personnel and to receive a higher caliber of care than would people of color. Conversely, the people who cleaned my mother's hospital room, did the laundry, cooked and cleaned in the cafeteria, and maintained the facilities were most likely people of color. The very context in which I entered the world was organized hierarchy how do I say this? Hierarchically by race. Hierarchically. Organized hierarchically by race. Based on this hierarchy, we could predict whether I would survive my birth based on my race. As I move through my daily life, my race is unremarkable. I belong when I turn on the TV, read best-selling novels, and watch blockbuster movies. I belong when I walk past the magazine racks at the grocery store or drive past billboards. I belong when I see the overwhelming number of white people on the list of the, quote, most beautiful. I may feel inadequate in light of my age or weight, but I will belong racially. For example, in 2017, singer Rihanna introduced a makeup line for women of all skin colors. Gratitude from women of color poured in. Many of their tweets included the exclamation, "Finally!" These tweets I have never needed to send. I belong when I look at my teachers, counselors, and classmates. I belong when I learn about the history of my country throughout the year and when I am shown its heroes and heroines. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Robert E. Lee, Amelia Earhart, Susan B. Anthony, John Glenn, Sally Ride, and Louisa May Alcott. I belong when I look through my textbooks at the pictures on my classroom walls. I belong when I speak to my children's teachers, when I talk to their camp counselors, when I consult with their doctors and dentists, no matter how I might explain why all these representations are overwhelmingly white. They still shape my identity and worldview. In virtually every situation or context deemed normal, neutral, or prestigious in society, I belong racially. This belonging is a deep and ever-present feeling that has always been with me. Belonging has settled deep into my consciousness. It shapes my daily thoughts and concerns, what I reach for in life, and what I expect to find. The experience of belonging is so natural that I do not have to think about it. The rare moments in which I don't belong racially come as a surprise that I can either enjoy for its novelty or easily avoid if I find it unsettling. For example, I was invited to a retirement party of a white friend. The party was a potluck picnic held in a public park. As I walked down the slope toward the picnic shelters, I noticed two parties going on side by side. One gathering was primarily composed of white people, and the other appeared to be all black people. I experienced a sense of disequilibrium as I approached and had to choose which party was my friend's. I felt a mild sense of anxiety as I considered that I might have to enter the all-black group. Then mild relief as I realized that my friend was in the other group. This relief was amplified as I thought that I might have been mistakenly walking over to the black party. All these thoughts and feelings happened in just a few seconds, but they were a rare moment of racial self-awareness. The mere possibility that I might have to experience not belonging racially was enough to raise racial discomfort. It is rare for me to experience a sense of not belonging racially, and these are usually very temporary, easily avoidable situations. Indeed, throughout my life, I have been warned that I should avoid situations in which I might be a racial minority. These situations are often presented as scary, dangerous, or sketchy. Yet if the environment or situation is viewed as good, nice, or valuable, I can be confident that as a white person, I will be seen as racially belonging there. The next section is called Freedom from the Burden of Race. Because I haven't been socialized to see myself or to be seen by other whites in racial terms, I don't carry the psychic weight of race. I don't have to worry about how others feel about my race, nor do I worry that my race will be held against me. While I may feel unease in an upper-class environment, I will take for granted that I belong racially in these settings. I certainly will not be the only white person there, unless the event is specifically organized by or celebrating people of color. George Zimmerman would not have stopped me as I walked through a gated suburban neighborhood. Patrick Rosell invites poignantly about the pain of being mistaken for the help at a black tie event celebrating National Book Award winners. I have witnessed this assumption of servitude many times as I checked into hotels with colleagues of color. I have made this assumption myself when I have been unable to hide my surprise that the black man is the school principal, or when I ask a Latinx woman kneeling in her garden if this is her home. As I consider career choices, I will have countless role models across a vast array of fields. When I apply for a job, virtually anyone in a position to hire me will share my race. And although I may encounter a token person of color during the hiring process, if I am not specifically applying to an organization founded by people of color, the majority of those I interact with will share my race. Once hired, I won't have to deal with my coworkers' resentment that I only got the job because I am white. I am assumed to be the most qualified. If there are people of color in the organization who resent my hire, I can easily dismiss them and rest assured that their feelings won't carry much weight. If resentment from employees of color does manage to come to my attention, I can find copious validation and other support from my white coworkers who will reassure me that our colleagues of colors are the ones who are biased. With race as a non-issue, I can focus on my work. And productivity and be seen as a team player. This is yet another example of the concept of whiteness as property discussed earlier. Whiteness has psychological advantages that translate into material returns. As I move through my day, racism just isn't my problem. While I am aware that race has been used unfairly against people of color, I haven't been taught to see this problem as any responsibility of mine. As long as I personally haven't done anything I am aware of, racism is a non-issue. This freedom from responsibility gives me a level of racial relaxation and emotional and intellectual space that people of color are not afforded as they move through their day. They don't lack these benefits just because they are members of a numerical minority, and I am not. White men are a numerical minority. It says that in parentheses. People of color lack these benefits because they are racialized within a culture of white supremacy, a culture in which they are seen as inferior, if they are seen at all. Raised in a culture of white supremacy, I exude a deeply internalized assumption of racial superiority. Having to navigate white people's internalized assumption of racial superiority is a great psychic drain for people of color, but I have no need to concern myself with that. Harsh. I think we're gonna cut it right here. Next section is going to be called Freedom of Movement for Chapter 4. Be careful with that and enjoy. Please and thank you, and I will see you for the next installment. Have a great one.